Move to the back. The sentence was short, sharp, and spoken with a confidence that didn't invite discussion. It cut through the low murmur of the boarding gate and landed squarely on a man standing alone with a folded boarding pass in his hand. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't even look surprised. He simply stood there, still as the people around him slowly turned to watch, each of them forming a quiet opinion about who he was and what they believed he deserved. The woman who said it had already decided the outcome before the words left her mouth. To her, this was routine. To the crowd, it was uncomfortable but easy to ignore. To the man, it was something else entirely. Because moments like this are rarely loud at first. They arrive disguised as authority, dressed up as policy, and spoken in a tone that suggests resistance would only make things worse. And no one watching had any idea how much this single sentence was about to reveal. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The gate was full in that particular way airports always are, crowded but detached, people physically close yet mentally somewhere else. The man, who we'll call Daniel Harris, looked ordinary by every surface measure. Mid-50s, neutral jacket, worn leather shoes, nothing that signaled importance or demanded attention. When he had stepped forward to scan his boarding pass, he expected nothing more than a nod and a quiet wave toward the jet bridge. Instead, the attendant glanced at the paper, frowned, and looked back up at him as if she had caught something that didn't belong. First class, she said, was boarding now, and this ticket wasn't his. Her voice was calm, practiced, and loud enough to carry. Daniel replied just as calmly that it was. That was when her posture changed. She straightened, repeated herself, and then said it, clearly this time, move to the back. A few people shifted their weight. Someone looked down at their phone. Someone else looked away. Calm, in moments like this, makes people uneasy because it doesn't fit the story they're already telling themselves. Daniel didn't step aside. He didn't step forward either. He remained exactly where he was, holding the boarding pass between two fingers, his stillness creating a strange pause that no one seemed eager to fill. The attendant interpreted that pause as defiance. Authority often does. She assumed compliance would follow once embarrassment had done its job. Around them, the crowd watched more closely now, not because they planned to intervene, but because something about the man's composure felt wrong for the role he'd been assigned. He wasn't acting like someone who had made a mistake. He wasn't acting like someone trying to get away with something. He was acting like someone waiting. And that waiting carried its own quiet pressure. Because what looked, on the surface, like obedience, like patience, like submission, was actually something else entirely. It was restraint. What happened to Daniel Harris at that boarding gate mattered for a reason far bigger than a delayed flight or a bruised ego, because public spaces have a way of turning private bias into a performance. Airports are built on rules, lines, and unspoken hierarchies, and when someone believes they are enforcing order, they rarely stop to question the assumptions guiding them. In moments like this, humiliation works not because it is loud, but because it is witnessed. It relies on the quiet agreement of everyone watching, on the belief that someone else will step in, or that the situation must be justified simply because it is happening. Daniel understood this better than most. He understood how certainty, once spoken aloud, becomes difficult to challenge, how a confident tone can replace evidence, and how quickly a narrative forms when no one interrupts it. The danger isn't always malice. Often, it's confidence without verification, authority without reflection, and the ease with which people accept a conclusion that saves them the discomfort of involvement. And for Daniel Harris, the weight of that moment carried a familiarity that no one else at the gate could see, because this wasn't the first time this had happened to him. Daniel Harris had no badge, no designer luggage, no visible mark that separated him from the ordinary travelers trudging through the airport that morning. And yet, he carried himself in a way that made people notice, even if they couldn't name why. He traveled often, though rarely drew attention, preferring the quiet observation of his surroundings over the performance of status. To him, the real measure of character was not in grand gestures, but in how people acted when they assumed no one important was watching. He had spent decades in boardrooms, conference halls, and crowded terminals watching this very dynamic unfold repeatedly, understanding that discipline over reaction, control over ego, and the patience to wait quietly often told more about a person than titles or introductions ever could. That calm, that careful silence, was not weakness, it was a strategy. He'd learned long ago that power reveals itself eventually, that authority, whether acknowledged or not, always finds a way to manifest. And in that terminal, as Daniel picked up the crumpled boarding pass and smoothed it carefully, every movement deliberate, every pause measured, the people around him were unaware that they were witnessing someone who had spent a lifetime understanding the subtleties of presence, judgment, and restraint. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Harris stood still, calm, a quiet presence in the growing tension that now gripped the terminal. Boarding had halted. Phones were out. Whispers had turned to murmurs, and the authority figure before him, determined to assert control, pressed harder. The flight attendant repeated her words, sharper this time. Move to the back. The crowd fractured into uneasy clusters. Some watched with curiosity, some with discomfort, others judgmental, convinced they understood the story unfolding. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't argue. Every gesture, every pause, was measured. He understood something most in that moment did not, that authority, when challenged, often doubles down, seeking control over clarity. And yet, he also knew that restraint could speak louder than protest, that stillness could reveal more truth than confrontation. Around him, the airport seemed suspended, caught between anticipation and disbelief, as everyone waited for the next move. At this point, the situation could only move in one of two directions. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Harris had done everything by the book. His boarding pass was valid. His identification matched perfectly. Yet, the gate seemed to turn against him, as if the system itself had decided to question his presence. Scanners beeped repeatedly, each sound punctuating the tension that hung in the air like a weight nobody wanted to acknowledge. Security personnel whispered into radios, their voices low but urgent, as if transmitting doubts that didn't belong to them alone. Around him, passengers shifted uncomfortably, some frowning, others silently judging, all convinced that authority must be correct. But Daniel stood silent, steady, understanding that systems are designed to enforce rules, not fairness, and that people often hide behind procedure to avoid facing the truth. Every minute stretched, each tick of the clock amplifying frustration, until a single phone call crackled through, unexpected, precise, and authoritative. That's when the call changed everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Harris remained still, his eyes calm but alert, as the murmur of the crowd rose and fell around him. Moments earlier, authority had seemed absolute, a rigid wall of rules and procedure that no one dared question. Then, without fanfare, two airport managers appeared at the gate. They did not rush. They did not demand compliance. Their approach was quiet, almost measured, as if testing the tension rather than breaking it. Their tones softened immediately, questions became gentler, and the words chosen carried caution instead of accusation. People in the line felt it instantly, though none could yet name why. The air had shifted, the invisible hierarchy had realigned itself, and Daniel's presence now subtly demanded acknowledgement. Eyes that had once judged now hesitated, whispers faded, and a new weight settled over the gate. Respect arrived before the reason did. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Harris remained perfectly still as the two managers approached, their presence alone shifting the atmosphere around the gate. The crowd, which had been tense and whispering, began to sense that something had changed, though no one could yet define what. Then one of the managers leaned slightly forward and, in a voice that was calm but deliberate, spoke his name. Daniel Harris. The words were quiet, almost understated, but they spread through the line like a ripple, traveling from one curious passenger to the next. Eyes widened, murmurs grew softer, and the sudden weight of understanding settled over the room. People glanced at him differently now, realizing that the quiet patience, the controlled restraint, and the absence of protest were never signs of weakness. They were deliberate. Daniel's voice finally cut through the stillness, calm, measured. I didn't correct you because I wanted to see how far this would go. In that moment, authority itself was exposed, and his character revealed. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The silence at Gate 14 lingered longer than anyone expected. Daniel Harris did not raise his voice. He did not demand recognition. He simply stood, letting the weight of the moment speak for him. The flight attendant's face had drained of color, her earlier authority crumbling under the quiet observation of a man who needed no spotlight to assert himself. Moments later, the operations manager stepped forward and offered words that carried neither anger nor excess. They were precise, measured, and sincere. "We apologize for the confusion," she said, her voice steady, acknowledging the misjudgment without exaggeration. Daniel nodded once, accepting the statement, and in that simple exchange, accountability was established. No one was humiliated, no one shouted, no dramatic confrontation occurred. The lesson was clear. Responsibility can exist without spectacle, and correction does not require loud condemnation. But the real lesson didn't belong to the airline. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Harris stepped onto the jet bridge last, his movements unhurried, deliberate, each step measured as if he were walking through a room of silent witnesses rather than a crowded airport. The passengers ahead of him shifted instinctively, not because anyone demanded it, but because they recognized something deeper, a quiet authority that needed no announcement, a presence that inspired acknowledgement rather than fear. No one clapped. No one cheered. The weight of the moment lay in its subtlety. As the door closed behind him, a gentle hum of the engines filled the space. The ordinary sounds of travel now layered with an extraordinary lesson about dignity, patience, and human decency. The quiet exit carried more meaning than any confrontation could have, proving that respect freely given carries a power that no title, uniform, or public spectacle can replicate. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. If Daniel Harris hadn't been who he was, the story would have been completely different. The flight attendant's words, the murmurs of the crowd, the pause in authority, all of it hinged on a truth that no one in that terminal yet fully grasped. Imagine the same moment with a different man, an ordinary traveler, unknown and unrecognized. Would the humiliation have escalated? Would anger have flared, cameras captured outrage, security called, and tempers lost? The way the story unfolded reminds us that identity alone changes perception, but character defines outcome. Daniel chose restraint. Daniel chose patience. Daniel allowed the moment to teach a quiet, enduring lesson. And now, we are left to reflect. In our daily interactions, in the judgments we pass in public and in private, how often do we assume the story we see is the whole story? How often do we miss the humanity beneath the surface? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Have you ever been in a moment where someone's calm and dignity changed the way everyone around them reacted? Share your story below, because sometimes the smallest, quietest actions leave the biggest impact.